Members, good morning. Thank you for attending today's meeting. We have a quorum, and this is the appointed time. So let's make a start. Item 1, information paper issued since the last meeting. The Secretariat has not issued any information paper to members since the last meeting. Items for discussion at the next meeting. May I ask the staff to invite the administration to come in, so that the administration would note the relevant deliberations on the matters to be discussed at the next regular meeting in May. Would members please refer to CB bracket 2545/2024 bracket 01, as well as the list of follow-up action, that is CB bracket 2545/2024 bracket 02. The next regular meeting is scheduled for 2:30 p.m. the 14th of May 2024. The administration's proposed to discuss the following items. A. Construction of a new public market at Kuto North New Development Area, and B. Reprovisioning of crematories and related works at Kwai Chung Crematorium. That's item 1 and item 2 on the list. Any views on matters to be discussed at the next meeting? If there is no objection, the next regular meeting will last for 2 hours until 4:30. Now, as some members have expressed concerns on the impacts of MSW charging and food waste recycling on community hygiene, having discussed with Mr. Edward Lau, chair of the other panel, we've agreed that a joint meeting will be held with the panel on environmental affairs between 2:30 and 4 p.m. on the 27th of May 2024 to discuss the way forward for MSW charging and other waste reduction and management measures. A notice will be issued soon. And the next item, measures to enhance refuse collection points in rural areas. Ms. CHAN Yuet-ming sent a letter to our panel dated the 23rd of April related to this item. That's CB bracket 2551/2024 bracket 01. The letter has also been referred to the administration for response. The Secretariat has prepared a background brief for this item, CB bracket 2545/2024 bracket 04, for members' reference. If you want to ask questions, please press the button requesting to speak. And meanwhile, let me invite Mr. Che Chin-wan, Secretary for Environment and Ecology, to walk us through this paper. Please keep it as short as possible to help us with more time for deliberation. Thank you. The government would like to enhance the hardware of refuse collection facilities in rural areas so as to improve environmental hygiene, and we will leverage on technology in enhancing the hardware of refuse collection facilities, as well as providing more facilities to facilitate staff convenience. In 2022 policy address, the government announced that fully enclosed refuse collection facilities with new design would be put in place at 500 priority rural collections. We have installed these facilities at 150 locations, and by phases we will be installing the facilities at some 350 other locations between 2024 and 2026. We'd also like to provide for staff convenience. For example, we have installed 60 solar cooling kiosks at suitable locations without electricity supply. We have the support of the stakeholders. They are of the view that this can help enhance environmental hygiene in rural areas. And without further ado, I'll give the floor to my colleague from the FEHD to walk you through the measures with the aid of a PowerPoint. Good morning. Rural areas are less populated with relatively scattered settlements. The FEHD, therefore, have provided a variety of refuse collection facilities. At the moment, there are some 900 village-type RCPs, refuse collection points, or RCPs with temporary structures. There are also some 2,020 waste containers. And the government announced in the 2022 policy address that fully enclosed refuse collection facilities with new design will be put in place at about 500 priority rural locations. These new facilities include solar-powered mobile refuse compactors, SMRCs, solar-powered compacting refuse bins, SCRBs, and solar-powered or foot pedal type aluminum RCPs. Now, if we take a look at the pictures here, on the top left corner, you will see this solar-powered mobile refuse compactors, SMRCs. It will be provided at village-type RCPs with a high yield and sufficient space. It takes more space for accommodating the refuse collecting vehicles, and we need staff to man the operation of the machine. So as long as the refuse yield meets our thresholds, we can install the SMRC at the location with sufficient space. It has a capacity of 4 to 8 tons. On the top right, you will see these solar-powered compacting refuse bins. It's a touchless type refuse bin. It can be operated with the use of a sensor. The inlets are also operated in a contactless manner. With a wave of a hand, you can open the inlet, and the capacity is also flexible. Depending on the refuse yield, we can decide how many of these units should be installed at the location. And then you see next to these two are the solar-powered or foot pedal type aluminum RCPs. These facilities are installed at locations with a lower refuse yield. So, like SCRBs, the inlets are operated in a contactless manner. You can use a foot pedal or use the solar-powered sensor to open the inlet. And it also carries a compacting function for the SCRBs, so that when the refuse yield reaches a certain level, the compacting function will begin, and this can help enhance the capacity of refuse collection. On the bottom right is foot pedal type aluminum RCP. It is similar to the one above, only that it's operated with a foot pedal. These facilities are installed at locations with insufficient sunlight and too much shade. So a foot pedal is used to operate the bins. The FEHC will consider factors such as the refuse yield of the district, hygiene condition of the RCPs and geographical locations, such as whether it is a level terrain and whether there is vehicular access, in deciding which facilities should be installed at what locations. And as I explained, as at 2023, we have installed 150 of these facilities at rural locations. In the coming 2 years, we will be installing facilities at some 350 other locations. So as you can see, this is the SCRBs installed at Nam Wah Po Blossom Villa in Tai Po District. Now, before putting the SCRBs there, we just put some wheelie bins, and on the right-hand side, you see the improvement after the bins have been installed. The next one is the RCP in Yuen Long District in Nam Bin Wai. And before that, you see a village-type RCP with a lot of wheelie bins outside. I believe this is a location with high refuse yield. Now, with the improvements, we have put an SMRC here as well as some refuse bins. So members of the public at night time can put the refuse in the aluminum RCPs, but during the day when this SMRC is manned by our staff, the refuse can go directly to the compactors. Now, if we just leave behind the refuse in the sun, this will cause environmental nuisance such as the one we see on the left-hand side. We also have measures providing staff convenience. As explained, we have installed some 60 solar cooling kiosks equipped with air coolers, fans and exhaust fans. It will be a resting lounge for our staff. And at suitable locations, we also request the contractors to provide mini dumper trucks with 3.5 tons of capacity to help carry the bins. Because in rural areas, the bins are scattered all over the place, and very often the wheelie bins would need to be pushed from one place to another. And this is an occupational hazard for workers. So the mini dumper trucks will help save time and reduce the risk of occupational injury. There is also another measure, and that is a fully enclosed onboard refuse bin cleaners. In rural areas, these bins may have to be taken back to suitable locations for cleansing. But if we have these vehicles, we can clean the refuse bins on board the vehicle. The FEHD will continue to leverage on different channels to mount publicity and public education. We will also continue to liaise with the residents in rural areas and other stakeholders to improve refuse collection services. At the same time, we'll step up enforcement actions. Internet protocol or IP cameras will be installed at suitable locations and black spots to tackle illegal dumping. That ends my presentation. Thank you, Secretary and his team. 7 members would like to speak. Let me read out their names. Mr. Ronald Chan, Ms. Judy Chan, Mr. Stanley Lee, Mr. Stephen Ho, Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Bill Tang, and myself. I'll give each member 4 minutes questions and answers, please. Please give them time for the administration to respond to your questions. Mr. Ronald Chan will kick off, please. Thank you, Chairman. In rural areas, apart from domestic waste, we also have yard waste, especially after typhoons that tend to be fallen branches, etc. Apart from the proposed enhancement measures, will the administration work with the EPD on tackling yard waste? For example, there may be a small-scale composting sites or facilities at the suitable locations to handle yard waste. Second question, according to the paper, to deter illegal dumping at 170 deposit black spots in rural areas, IP cameras have been installed, but there are over 3,000 such sites. That's in rural areas. That's about 5% coverage at the moment. Do you think it's sufficient just to install IP cameras at 170 locations in the rural areas? After introducing MSW charging, will you consider expanding the coverage of IP cameras? The third question is this. You just brief us on the state-of-the-art technology on refuse compactors, bins, etc. According to my calculation, there are 3,100 refuse collection points, but between 2024 and 2026, you will only install facilities at some 350 other locations. So when will we achieve full coverage? 3 questions for the Secretary. Perhaps I'll give the floor to Mr. Yu, Deputy Director from the FEHD, to take your questions. First, on refuse collection facilities, the EPD also attaches importance to waste reduction and recycling in rural areas. The EPD installs, say, tricolor bins to collect different recyclables. For fallen branches and leaves, indeed, there aren't many facilities available. We will explore the options with the EPD. For rural residents, after collecting yard waste, they can be deposited at our RCPs. We don't have a facility especially for yard waste, so we'll need to work that out with the EPD. As for the other question on enforcement, enforcement is one way to tackle illegal dumping. But there are other prongs, such as publicity. After all, the new territories are a vast place, so if we are to install IP cameras to fully cover the entire area, it would be quite impossible given the resource implications. Now the IP cameras have been installed in 170 locations. We don't think this is sufficient. More cameras will be installed. We will have regard to whether there are illegal deposit black spots in a particular area. But in the long run, IP cameras is not the only way to deter fly tipping. We'd like to use different means to reduce waste. Finally, on an improvement or enhancement measures in the coming years, we've set a target, and that is to install facilities at 500 locations in total. But we won't stop at just 500 locations. At some rural areas, it would be possible just to install a 6-liter bin there. So there, depending on the refuse yield, if it's low, we'll give it a lower priority. If the yield is high, we will install new facilities. But we won't stop at just 500 locations. So we will have regard to the actual circumstances and install facilities at some more locations. This is just a near-term target.
All
right, thank you, Mr. Li Chen. Thank you, Chair. I also want to follow up on enforcement matters. These black spots are relatively low in pedestrian traffic. So we also see that there's insufficient space, so people just place larger waste next to the bins. As Mr. Chen Yuet-ming said, this year we have installed in 440 black spots for illegal deposit of waste, installed some IP cameras, and 170 of them are in rural areas. Be it urban or rural areas, we do see people depositing waste illegally, and in fact we're seeing more of that. I want to know about the prosecution figures by retrieving footage from these IP cameras. Can you provide such after the meeting if you don't have such available? And what is the threshold that you are adopting for enforcement? Thank you. Secretary, I'll let Mr. Yu supplement my answer. In general, we do see in rural areas that they do not often deposit waste. If we do see waste that is not, well, technically their bins are not full and they would still deposit waste outside of the bins because they think that there is poor hygiene. Even with those that have a higher yield, we have now put in place the fully enclosed refuse collection facilities with new design in order to compact the waste so as to alleviate this situation. I'll let Mr. Yu supplement my answer by talking about the enforcement matters. All right, Deputy Director, thank you. IP cameras are just a way to help us with enforcement. If the cameras capture people driving to the RCPs and depositing waste illegally, we can capture the registration mark and then prosecute the vehicle owner. If we have captured certain individuals depositing waste illegally regularly, we can also devise plans to ambush the individual. It would depend on what we can see on the camera, and then we will act on such intelligence. We will also receive reports from nearby residents. It really depends on the circumstances. If we see that there are certain black spots where there is often illegal depositing of waste, we will take enforcement action. Chair, I want to clarify this. Is it the case that they will only take enforcement action when they have received a complaint or a report? Well, as I said earlier, New Territories is a vast area. We have resources constraints. That's why we would act on reports, but we also have cleansing workers who would observe the situation, and they can report to their supervisors, and we'll take enforcement action if necessary. Thank you. Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you. I myself have visited some RCPs myself with some FEHD staff. I did see the condition that they are pretty good, but I have some questions about the aluminum RCPs. When I went to Sai Kung, I could see that there are less bins than shown in the photos provided by the administration. From what I know, they would need humans to operate the vehicles or the tools. And often these bins would get full very quickly. And when these bins get full, citizens would not be able to use them. I also want to ask for some RCPs. From what I was told, they can prevent any pest infestation or wild animals trying to scavenge for food. Are there still such cases with such installation of facilities? If there are still such cases, how can you prevent that from happening again? Thank you. I'll let Mr. Yu supplement my answer again. For the new facilities, they will prevent wild pigs or wild animals from scavenging for food because they are pretty tough. It is not easy for animals to push the cover open and get inside. With these new facilities, we did observe less pest infestation. Because as I said earlier, it's not easy for them to get inside. We did see these being quite effective, but unfortunately we do not have such figures because we do not observe them getting inside. But we did see these being effective. I'll let Mr. Yu supplement my answers on, for example, the frequency of the cleansing of RCPs. In general, we would remove waste once a day. If we see a higher refuse yield, we may do things differently. As Mr. Lee said, the solar-powered aluminum RCP is just one type of them. We have other facilities such as compactors or compacting refuse bins. And depending on the actual circumstances, we may increase the frequency of the collection of waste. If members note certain RCPs that often have a high refuse yield, please let us know and we'll follow up with them. Thank you. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you. The DAB has all along been attaching great importance with the improvement of refuse collection facilities, and we did conduct visits ourselves as well with the accompaniment of REHC staff, we did see improvement in the refuse collection facilities with the new facilities, but there is still room for improvement. For example, the solar-powered aluminum RCP is an improvement, but we need to take a user's perspective. It's not someone like me who would just be depositing waste. There are people living in village houses that would deposit hundreds of bags of waste, especially after festive occasions, or that they are carrying larger or heavier waste. And it is quite a hassle for them to get such waste to the RCPs. And from what I observed, it will only take 15 to 20 seconds for the cover to close again. You may think it is enough for people in general, but for people who are depositing multiple bags of waste, it is a hassle for them because it is located at some height, and with the lids closing very soon, it may collide with their hands. With these scenarios, does the administration have any figures on what is going to happen should there be any malfunctioning of the bins? How long will it take for the administration to replace the bins or repair the bins? I also see in rural areas that people would just deposit waste outside the aluminum RCPs. And for those with high refuse yield, they would just deposit waste regardless outside bins. I can see that cleansing workers would just collect the waste from the outside, but then with their tools, it can damage the surface of the road or the ground, and then there would be pest infestation. And who is going to repair the surface? Is it the contractor or is it the highways department that will do that? You see such actions done a lot, and it can be very damaging. Will there be any improvement measures implemented by the administration to prevent this from happening? I'll let Mr. Yu supplement my answers. I do thank Mr. Stephen Ho for your feedback. The SCRBs and SMRCs would deal with higher refuse yield. For those with a smaller refuse yield, we will have in place some auto collection bins. I will invite my colleagues to review whether the facilities are good enough. We do see some bins that will malfunction, but it's not the case that all of them would malfunction at the same time. We have not observed that. I'll let Mr. Yu give more information on this. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Ho has given us very good feedback. We'll see what we can do in the improvement of the design and our arrangements with the contractors regarding the collection of waste. We have observed that the operations of the facilities are in general quite smooth. For every year, we do see such facilities needing to be repaired once in general. For the recycling facilities, it may be different. It depends on the condition of the facilities. In general, if it gets loose, we will have someone look at it within 48 hours, and if it needs repairing, we will conduct repairs. If large-scale repairs are required, it may take longer indeed. But in general, we only need to repair the facilities only once per year. For the features that get damaged, often we'll see if there is any room for improvement in its design. Well, there are contractors who would make use of vehicles that may cause damage indeed, and that is not acceptable. We'll see if we can promulgate more guidelines, and we will also monitor the performance of the contractors to see if there is any insufficient compliance with the guidelines. We'll definitely follow up on the situation.
I'm not blaming the Grab lorry drivers. They only acted on instructions. But the point is, once you lower the grab and you press a button, it starts grabbing like this. You need to introduce a new set of guidelines. You should not just punish them. It doesn't help. The second point is about the worker hurling many bags of refuse onto the into the bin, and that the lid may close in 10 seconds. Well, this is good for individuals, but if you're talking about larger scale refuse collection, you may need to install a button for the lid to remain open for a longer time. And for the third question, you need to make sure you have the spare parts ready, because if it takes 2 or 3 months to order the spare parts for replacement, there will be problems. Mr. Ring Kong, a number of questions. First, about the solar-powered mobile refuse compactors. I want to know how much solar power can be supplied, how long is it good for, and also the manpower spared. And then the next question is, there is an indicator to show whether the bins are full, but are there more advanced ways to tell residents that the bins are full? Because it will be a futile trip if I bring along the bags of refuse to the RCP only to find out that the bins are full. Another point. Well, isn't it amazing? I mean, you have the fully enclosed onboard refuse bin cleaners. How many refuse bins can you clean a day? My fourth question is this about installing IP cameras at illegal deposit black spots. Will you switch the locations on a regular basis, or are they installed permanently at those locations? Because after looking at these photos, I am concerned about safety. Let's say if somebody commits murder and then the body is dismembered, and then if there is no IP camera installed at the bins, one can just throw the body parts into the bins, and then the compactor will start working, and there will be no trace of evidence left. It's kind of horrifying if you don't have IP cameras to monitor the process. 4 questions. Compactors, I don't think it will work as you've described. I will ask Mr. Yu to supplement this question, but let me explain that for the refuse collector vehicles, it also comes with a compacting function. Mr. Poon can answer your other questions. Yes, Mr. Peter Poon, Assistant Director. Thank you, member, for the questions about whether an app can be developed to indicate whether the bins are full. We can go back and explore this option, but I'm afraid at this point we haven't developed any app. very often when the bins are full, especially during evening hours, we can arrange for the contractor staff to empty them more often. And it's not often that a resident will find the bins full only when they arrive at them with the refuse. If that is the case, we'll be told by the village heads, and then we will also improve the situation. The member asked about the fully enclosed onboard refuse bin cleaners. Now, the vehicle cleanses two types of bins, 240-liter or 600-liter bins. For 240-liter bins, this vehicle can accommodate 18 of them at a time, but there are other constraints because, say, water supply is one concern. For 600-liter bins, it can cleanse 44 at a time. We need to drive the vehicle then to a suitable location for the discharge of sewage and refill of the water tank. On the issue of compacting waste, I don't think the compactors or the compactor bins are so powerful as to shred the dead bodies into pieces. It's just slightly compressing the waste to reduce the volume. Yes, that's my observation. It just squeezes out air in the refuse bags to save space. It's not as powerful, Mr. Bill Tang. It's a very sobering question for me. I am delighted to hear the use of better designed and high-tech refuse bins, but I'm concerned about the welfare of our workers. Can you tell me exactly how these bins can help reduce the intensity of labor? It's not just about convenience. Well, the bins are full, come and empty them. Well, this is not something that the labor unions would like to hear. We'd like to achieve win-win. Now, next point, I've learned about the solar cooling kiosks for workers to take a break. You need to have a fixed location for workers to take a break with good ventilation, with a roof over the head, and preferably with fresh water for cleansing. Very often workers would bring their own lunch boxes, so ideally there should be a refrigerator for the storage of food, and if no refrigerator is available, whether there are other options, because some workers, they work in rural areas and an eatery may not be readily available for them to buy lunch. So these are the questions I'd like you to respond to. Secretary. On workers' welfare, such as reducing the intensity of labor and transferring refuse from the bins to the large-scale compactors, we have given all these into account in our design. Mr. Poon can tell you more about the resting lounges or resting rooms. Mr. Poon? For the solar cooling kiosks, they are equipped with air coolers, LED lamps, electric fans, exhaust fans, electric sockets, also furniture, tables, chairs, storage units. But I don't think refrigerator is something that is available at this moment because of the limitations of solar energy. So I'm afraid we cannot install refrigerators in in the basic solar cooling kiosks. I'm afraid that because of the power requirement, we may not be able to install refrigerators. The kiosks are put in place as a very simple structure for workers to take a break. If workers are to have a meal there, they should go back to the place where they report duty or the offices in order to do so. What about reducing the intensity of labor? Can you elucidate on this point? We have different facilities that deal with different levels of refuse yield. If the yield is high, we make use of the SMRCs, and that the bins can be lifted for refuse to go into the compactors. We also have on a smaller scale, the 3.5 ton refuse collecting vehicles to help workers transport bins which are scattered across the rural areas. And workers will need to get the bins to a designated location for taking the vehicle to take them. So we can help push the bins to the locations. Yes, let me supplement. I am also concerned about this point as well. Now, in the past, when we when we put a roadside wheelie bin with larger capacity at that spot, it's really labor intensive, because if the bins are full, they get very heavy and you need to push the bins along bumpy roads. Now we use smaller bins, and that it would be easier for them to transport the bins to the locations. And with the compacting function, the SMRCs will automatically lift the refuse bin up, and this can also help reduce labor intensity. Mr. Benson, look. Chairman, according to the administration's paper, simple RCPs are set up at 900 locations. There are also some 2,000 bins installed at these sites to facilitate residents to dispose of their household waste. And there is now a pilot scheme at 500 priority rural locations. The facilities with new design, which are fully enclosed, will be installed or have been installed. Of course, from the user's perspective, there is an improvement in environmental hygiene. I think one matter close to the hearts of rural residents is wild animals, wild pigs and monkeys, and these facilities can help deter them from foraging for food at refuse collection points. In 2023, these facilities were installed at 150 rural locations. So we need to acknowledge the achievement of these facilities with new design. Riding on this success, the FEHD will install facilities at all of the 500 priority locations. My first question is this. What are the factors that the FEHD will take into account for fully enclosed facilities to be installed at more locations? Because, like I said, there are some 900 RCPs in rural areas. On what basis will you consider expanding the coverage of the fully enclosed facilities? The other question is this. Usually, the government would consult the Legislative Council, district councils, and area committees on livelihood related matters, and this is one thing that is close to the livelihood of the people. Have you consulted the Hon CHAN? Have you received any response from them?
蔣解答。
Thank you, Secretary, please. Thank you. We value feedback from residents. And with these solar facilities, we have been collecting feedback from residents in rural areas to see how we can improve the design. I'll let the Deputy Director talk about the details. Thank you. We have considered several factors when putting in place the facilities. One would be the refuse yield. If the refuse yield is higher, we will make use of SMRCs because it will save 40 to 60 waste containers. That's why we would prioritize locations with a higher refuse yield to put in place the SMRCs. It also depends on the environmental hygiene in the area. If we think that there are inadequate facilities causing poor environmental hygiene, we'll put in place such facilities with a higher priority. The sizes of different facilities are different. We will have to liaise with the residents in the area to see if they actually want us to put in place certain facilities, or would they prefer having more space for parking instead. We have received such feedback before. When we set our priorities, we do consider different factors. We do want to put in place more facilities, but there are constraints and we have to consider the views of the residents. We will continue to liaise with village residents on this. We will liaise with Hon CHAN or members of the rural committees. We have in fact maintained close liaison with them. We have been communicating with them frequently. We have receive feedback from them regularly. We have also conducted visits with them, and members have also gone on such visits before. So you should know that we have maintained close liaison with residents, and we will continue to work on this. Thank you. Mr. Siu Ka-fei. Thank you. With the fully enclosed refuse collection facilities with new design, I do support these being used. When we utilize technologies, we can increase the productivity, and we can also expedite the handling of waste. We will also be more environmentally friendly by putting in place such facilities. MSW charging will be implemented on 1st of August. For those in rural areas, they will deposit waste in the large green waste containers. When refuse collection vehicles get there, they can automatically tow the waste containers and deposit such waste in the landfills. It would be relatively quick. However, when MSW charging is implemented, one would have to check whether the designated bags are used. I understand that contractors of cleansing services would have to differentiate between waste that use designated bags and waste that do not. In housing estates, we have such cleansing workers that would do that, but in RCPs in rural areas, we may not have proper workers that would do that. What is going to happen then? Would you have your own cleansing workers differentiate waste? And how will you be able to catch the people who have deposited waste illegally in the sense that they do not use the designated bags or the designated labels. Thank you. Secretary. Thank you. It is as Mr. Shu Kafai said. We have in place requirements for housing estates that property management companies should make sure waste are deposited in designated bags. If they are not in designated bags, they should put them in the larger bags and then place them into refuse collection vehicles. For village type RCPs, they are managed by the FEHD. So we will not require workers to differentiate between waste. However, if the RCP is managed by some other staff, they will simply refuse waste that are not deposited in designated bags or affixed with designated labels. Indeed, we may not be able to differentiate between different wastes. If we do not have cameras, we may not be able to catch those who do not comply with the rules. We believe it is more important, therefore, to implement public education and publicity to make sure people won't do that. We will also adopt a risk-based approach with enforcement, and we will take more stringent enforcement action in the black spots. Let me also say this. We have been implementing the pilot implementation of MSW charging with certain premises, and we will refer to the effectiveness of implementation to see what the next step is. Thank you. But I want to follow up on something. For people depositing waste in the large green containers, they will automatically be towed by refuse collection vehicles, and they will deposit waste in the landfills. The problem is refuse collection vehicles would tow bins from multiple areas. How will you be able to identify those who have deposited waste? Because you will not know which area they have deposited the waste in, as the refuse collection vehicles would tow multiple bins. I think you really have to take this into consideration. Secretary, thank you. During the early and pilot implementation, we have definitely taken that into consideration, and we will definitely review the progress of such early and pilot implementation of MSW charging. Thank you. It's now my turn to speak. I want to ask if you will adopt a hybrid approach with the refuse collection facilities and implement foot pedals in multiple facilities so that when an electric cover is malfunctioning, people can still make use of the foot pedals. I also know that there are some RCPs that do not have insufficient space, but will you consider putting more recycling facilities and food waste recycling bins? I also want to know, do you keep data on how many times the lids have opened? If you have such data, you will perhaps have data on the peak times that people will deposit waste, and you can refer to such data when thinking when to collect waste from the RCPs, and that will facilitate your work in the collection of waste. Thank you. Secretary, please. Thank you. I'll let Mr. Yu supplement or answer the questions. Thank you. We have in place different types of fully enclosed refuse collection facilities with new design. For elderly persons and the disabled persons, it may not be possible for them to make use of the foot pedals, which is why we consider solar-powered facilities to be more accommodating. But we will take note of the members' feedback so that when there is a malfunctioning of the solar power system, we can still make use of foot pedals. We have some staff members who would tell us the observations that they have made when working in RCPs. If we see certain facilities that will get full at certain times or when certain conditions are fulfilled, we'll definitely take that into consideration when putting in place the arrangements for the collection of waste. We will also take into account feedback from frontline workers. Because they work there, they know the conditions and the circumstances of the RCPs. Through such liaison and the use of technologies, we hope to facilitate our collection of waste to make it more efficient. We have also put in place the tricolor recycling bins in certain rural areas. We may not be able to achieve full coverage at the moment due to various constraints. For areas with sufficient space, we will definitely see if we can put in place recycling facilities. If not, we will consider putting in place such facilities in the vicinity so as to facilitate recycling by members of the public. I can see that we have some time left. I'll let Mr. Tan Ka-Piu ask another round. Oh, you don't have to speak. All right. We have had 10 members express support the installation of fully enclosed facilities with new design in rural areas, and we have given suggestions on the arrangements. We hope that the administration can take note of members' feedback and see if there is any room for improvement for these facilities. Thank you. We'll move to the next agenda item, enhancing the food business licensing regime. This is a legislative proposal. All members of the council are invited to join the discussion. The LegCo Secretariat has also prepared a background brief, CB brackets 2545/2024 brackets 06, and a paper was provided by the administration, CB brackets 2545/2024 brackets 05. Let's invite representatives of the administration to come inside the conference room. As I said earlier, please refer to the two papers for information on this agenda item. I'll ask the Undersecretary to brief members on CB brackets 2545/2024 brackets 05.
Undersecretary, Chairman, members. Today we'd like to brief members on measures relating to the food business licensing regime. In Policy Address 2022 and 2023, the government announced measures to streamline the food business licensing regime. we are going to focus on measures as announced in 2023 policy address today, and we'd like to consult members on the proposed legislative amendments for introducing a composite permits. The first measure is to expand the scope of professional certification system. On the 1st of March 2023, alongside relaxing the restrictions on the scope of food items that can be sold by light refreshment restaurants, LRRs, we've also introduced the professional certification PCS into licenses for LRRs and food factory on a pilot basis as an additional option for obtaining a full license under the license first, inspection later approach. And under PCS, a full license will be issued for applicants who have received this notification for compliance. The FEHD will arrange on-site inspection after the letter of requirements has been issued. And under PCS, applicants who have engaged an authorized person or registered structural engineer can certify the compliance with all the licensing requirements, and then there'll be on-site inspection under the license first, inspection later approach. And normally the PCS allows applicants to obtain a full license about 2 weeks earlier. The next measure is to introduce a composite permit to cover multiple kinds of restricted foods. At the moment, for restricted items in Schedule 2, such as Chinese herbal tea and ice cream in original wrappers, the applicant must obtain a written permission from the director. And we are going to introduce a composite permit to cover different types of restricted food. Applicants can give regard to their own circumstances and need and decide whether to apply for a single permit that covers only one kind of restricted food or a composite permit to cover multiple kinds of restricted foods. At the moment, one permit is required for each type of restricted food, and the fees for approving and renewing these permits are in general about $500. And for the sale of one of the restricted food for sashimi or sushi, the sale of one or both of these two items will be treated as one, and then the fee will remain the same. As for the composite permit that covers multiple kinds of restricted food, we propose the fees for approval and renewal of the permit to be $810. Now, if on top of sashimi and sushi, the applicant would like to sell one or more restricted foods on top of those, then he will need to pay $810 for the composite permit. Because of the different permit requirements, the process for other kinds of food items may be more stringent, and as a result, they will still need to apply for a permit for each types of food. In order to introduce the composite permit, we have to amend the Public Health and Municipal Services fee regulations to set out the fees, and subject to our progress of drafting, we strive to introduce the proposal to LegCo in the second half of 2024. The next measure is setting more lenient food license terms for farms engaged in commercial agricultural production in cooking their produce. The government is striving to promote leisure farming. In the first half of 2024, the FEHD will set more lenient terms for farms which would like to promote leisure farming as an auxiliary business, such as selling their own produce cooked by simple methods. And the AFCD will provide a list of farms engaged in the commercial agricultural production with such intention to develop leisure farming. Then the FEHD will strive to relax the licensing conditions without compromising food safety and environmental hygiene. The next measure is to issue e-license. At the moment, electronic services are offered for license permit applications such as submission of the forms, e-processing, e-tracking, and e-payment. With effect from the second half of 2024, the FEHD will proceed to the issuance of licenses or permits through electronic means, obviating the applicant's need to visit a license issuing office in person. And through the system, we will increase transparency. That means that we will allow applicants to check the progress and status through the online system. We will also publish a DIY application for food business licenses. In fact, we published the DIY application for food business licenses in the end of March 2024. The animated video clip provides clear instructions on the application process. This can help save costs for those who would like to apply for a license and start a business. Finally, waiving application for a bakery license for restaurants selling their bakery products, as well as waiving the submission of documents on the use of communal toilet facilities. So for these two waivers, in a licensed general restaurant and light refreshment restaurant, we have waived the requirement for a separate bakery license to be sought for the retail sale of bread and other bakery products. The next waiver is that if the eatery is unable to provide toilets within the premises, such, for example, if the restaurant is situated in a shopping mall or in a building to be with a communal toilet. In the past, they would need to submit documentary proof to show that the customers could use the communal toilet facilities. Now we've introduced a waiver. There is no need to submit the documents, but they should comply with the licensing conditions to ensure that the communal toilet facilities are available for use by their customers. This can help provide more flexibility to facilitate the industry's business, and we welcome views from members, and we will be taking forward the legislative proposal according to the schedule. Thank you, Undersecretary. 6 members have indicated their wish to speak: Mr. Tommy Cheung, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Ronald Chang, Mr. Peter Shiu, and Ms. Doreen Kong. I will give each member 4 minutes, questions and answers included. Please make sure that after you've put the question, there is still sufficient time for the administration to respond to your question. Mr. Tommy Cheung. Undersecretary, some short questions for your short replies, please. I agree that the composite permit should be introduced. I'm just worried that regarding the professional certification system, you should make sure that the professionals will not be fleecing the eateries. On farms engaged in commercial agricultural production, in fact, I've made this point on a public occasion, and I've told you before, don't just give them license to sell their own produce. Allow them to have barbecues on the site, because for some barbecue sites, they only have the fresh provisions license, and then after buying the frozen meat, they can then use the barbecue pits on their site. You should allow farms to operate this business as well, so as to help them make a profit. Don't just allow them to sell their produce. Any difficulties? If my suggestion is to be taken on board, Undersecretary. Yes, I note your concern, because PCS involves professionals and registered structural engineer, as well as authorized person, who will closely monitor their fees and charges and consider the impact on the catering industry. To answer your next question about streamlining the food license applications for commercial agricultural farms engaged in commercial agricultural production, will only allow produce cooked by simple methods. As for barbecue sites, as you mentioned, we've come across these cases and we've taken action jointly with the police. In the future, we will work with the relevant departments such as the AFCD and the police to explore the optimal approach to handling these cases. Be as relaxed as possible. And another point is on the composite permit. I think this is a good deed. I've been making this suggestion for decades. For general restaurant license, you allow this composite permit as a major license. What about supermarkets? At one point, I know that they need to apply for different permits for selling different products such as frozen meat, ice creams, bakery products. Well, I think this relates more to the sector represented by Peter Shill than my sector, the catering sector. I just want to know whether they are included as well. Would you consider including them as well in future? Now you refer to composite food license, and that's one license. We plan to introduce something else. It's called the composite permit. There are 2,300 permit holders who held more than one permit for sale of different restricted foods. Now, for composite food license applicable to supermarkets, as I understand, only one supermarket holds this license. The sector will have regard to their own operations. I'm sorry, I have a more urgent question. Let's stop here. Paragraph 18 refers to communal toilets in shopping arcades, and now the sector will not need permission from the landlord. No, we're just waiving the submission of documentary proof. But at one point, we had to count the number of urinals and toilet cubicles for gents' toilets and ladies' toilets. That means we first need to consider the number of eateries in a shopping mall and the size of the shopping mall and the proportion of toilet facilities. And only when all the requirements are met will approval be given. Well, you still need to follow the requirements. Only that some shopping arcades charge the restaurants for this written consent. Right, indeed, some landlords behave themselves like this. My concern is this. Even if you've waived the documents submission requirement, if you don't have sufficient urinals in a shopping mall, then we may be in dire straits, because all of a sudden there may be a change and there may not be sufficient urinals on a single floor. We are enhancing the current measures. In fact, the current measures still apply, only that we're waiving the documentary proof requirement. You mentioned the proportion of toilets to catering facilities. I think that we can explore this matter later. Mr. Stephen Ho. I welcome the relaxation measures. Mr. Tommy Zhang has asked some of the questions I'd like to ask. Well, in fact, I have questions relating to farms engaging in commercial agriculture production. There are 2 points. Say, if I have commercial catering services provided by a farm, is it that no land premium will be paid and that this can be dealt with by the FEHD? Second point, if we are to erect a structure on a farm, we need to get the consent from the landlord, and like the other measure, the landlord will usually charge a hefty sum for this written consent. So perhaps you should relax the written consent requirement for farms as well, because some landlords are more agreeing. Some landlords tend to charge $20,000–$30,000 for the written consent. About the relaxation requirement, I'm not saying that I disagree with Mr. Tommy Zhang, but farms should engage in commercial agricultural production as their primary business. They should not use the land for setting up barbecue pits, because this will be a departure from the intended use of agricultural sites. So you need to think very carefully. And about the composite permit, if we turn to the schedule of the regulations, you will see that the 1A, fresh meat, and then it's followed by chilled meat, etc. So they're mostly related to meat and meat products. If you relax this requirement, I don't know whether this applies to other FEH licenses as well. Is like I said before, you can sell fresh pork and chilled pork, but not preserved sausages. There is a concern about the mix of raw and cooked meat, and I know that this is legitimate. But in fact, in a market, you can just designate, in a supermarket, you can designate a spot for selling fresh meat and another spot for cooked meat. So this is not a level playing field. You need to make sure that there is level playing field for all.
Under Secretary, thank you. We are talking about the food business licensing regime. That's why the content is related to this. But we understand that the operators will have to seek approval from other departments such as the Lands Department in advance. In rural areas, for example, in LegCo, the operators had to liaise with the Lands Department and the Planning Department on the relevant uses. With the approval needed from landowners, well, it's not the case. For example, if I have to obtain a first business license, I would still require a consent from the landowner, right? Well, that would circle back to my first point. We will make some announcements in future with the Planning Department as well as the Lands Department. As I said earlier when responding to Mr. Tommy Chung's questions, there are some farms that would cook their agricultural produce with simple cooking methods, and this is the requirement that we're relaxing on this occasion. What you said about barbecuing, it would be more complicated, such as what happened in Kawaking. It would involve multiple departments, and we'll follow up on this. Regarding what you said earlier, I'll talk about the different parts one by one. With the permit, it is one thing, and with the relaxation of the requirement for farms are engaging in commercial agricultural production, it is a different thing. And regarding what you said about the Chinese preserved sausages and so on, they are restricted foods, and they are an entirely different matter. We can't mix them all together. So for farms engaged in commercial agricultural production, we have relaxed the requirements for the food license terms because they would still have to comply with other licensing conditions such as drainage or cleaning and so on. I think as long as you're not charging them to issue a letter, that would be fine because it can be quite burdensome for them. Thank you. Mr. Chen Yuet-ming. Regarding the professional certification system, according to a report issued last year, we have only 10 applications for this system to be applied. Do you think it's a matter of awareness, or is it the cost that is restraining people from applying for this because the cost of engaging professionals may be quite high? I want to ask also for farms engaged in commercial agricultural production and leisure farming. There will be a list provided by the FSCD to the FEHD? Has the list been provided to the FEHD, and how many farms are there if such list has been provided to the department? Actually, if I didn't read the paper, I would not have known that you have waived the application for a bakery license for restaurants selling their bakery products and the submission of documents on the use of communal toilet facilities. In fact, members have expressed earlier whether such requirements were necessary. It could be quite burdensome for restaurant operators to provide such requirements. And if we have to still have the restaurants comply with the licensing conditions, it can be quite harsh. Have you considered when to review such requirements? Thank you. Undersecretary, please. The professional certification system is an alternative option, so those in the sector can opt for this or the original option. Right now, we have received 13 applications under the PCS, and 2 of them have been approved. For food factories and the light refreshment restaurants, PCS has been made applicable in 2023 and it has been expanded to general restaurants in 2024. It would be up to restaurant operators to choose which option to go for. We decide that it would be appropriate to review after a certain period of time whether this is effective. Also, with the list that is to be provided by FSCD, we have yet to get that from the FSCD, but we can ask the FSCD for the relevant figures and provide them to members for your reference. Let me just say this. These measures are subject to continuous review, the measures that we have provided in our paper, and I'll let the Deputy Director supplement my answers. Thank you. As the Undersecretary said, the measures are subject to continuous review, and we have relaxed the requirements for light refreshment restaurants. Before, they can only sell the items on a specific list. We think that it is no longer appropriate to impose such requirements. So as long as light refreshment restaurants are cooking food with simple methods, we would accept that. As for whether requirements can be relaxed, we have in place a mechanism that would facilitate our continuous liaison with the F&B industry. The trade does understand our perspectives through such liaison sessions. We'll make sure we will have continuous liaison with them to listen to their feedback. Thank you. Mr. Shiokafai, I do support the streamlining of the food business licensing regime. I also welcome the introduction of a composite permit as well as the issuance of e-licenses and so on. These will facilitate businesses. I also appreciate the use of advanced technologies. With food business licensing regime, the permit holders or license holders would have to comply with the conditions stipulated. We have been discussing recently the environmental legislation, and in fact this morning I have been talking with those in the trade on this. We have some food courts in Hong Kong. From what I know, they should hold a temporary food factory license. And they should only provide takeaway food. But we know that there is often seating in the malls near the food courts. But this is the case that the malls are providing them for other people to sit there to read books and so on. But people are taking advantage of such seating to consume food. I understand that with the amendments in legislation, the people will be able to get takeaway food, but the tableware used should not be plastic. It should be recyclable. I understand why this is necessary, but since they are holding licensing conditions, holding licenses with conditions that they should only provide takeaway food, if they provide non-plastic tableware, will that be a contravention of the law? Will that cause a burden on the frontline workers? Or is it the case that you would adopt an overarching principle that you just want to make sure it is convenient for people? You would not prosecute the staff members for doing so. Thank you. Well, I think these are two different matters. One, the food business licensing regime under Chapter 132 for the legislation that would prohibit the use of plastic tableware. That would be a legislation under the EPD. So it would be different departments undertaking such enforcement action. So the EPD will not enforce laws relating to the food business licensing regime and vice versa. With the changes made to the legislation on the prohibition of use of plastic tableware, it does not relate to the food business licensing regime. And on 25th of April, we have made an announcement that would talk about very clear about the circumstances for enforcement action to be taken. For example, if sushi or sashimi is placed on shelves, it would be a form of takeaway food. It would be regarded as such. That's why they can make use of the transparent plastic covers for their packaging. If you are ordering cooked food, that is, if you pre-order food such as fried noodles, this would be classified as prepared food. And transparent plastic containers cannot be used. This is very clear. Thank you. I did see the announcement on 25th of April, but then, for example, for food courts, they are suddenly subject to enforcement by both the EPD team and the FEHJ team. And there is someone who ordered fried noodles, stir-fried noodles, and said that they would like to have the food on site, then it would not be a problem. But then the FEHD team may say, hey, you can't do takeaway food. You can't do food that is to be consumed on site because you can only provide takeaway food. Then that would be a contravention. As I said before, we had before recyclable tableware, and I don't think that will be a contravention of the law. And even if people make use of glass, then that would conform to the laws, and they would provide them to people consuming the food on site, and it can be cleaned before, and that was the model that worked. If you are providing, once you have made the changes, then people are worried that the arrangements before will be a breach of the law. I think you need to make sure people can rest assured that they won't break the laws. Well, I think the Undersecretary can take note of the suggestion. It is not exactly relevant to what we're talking about today, but it is indeed good feedback. I hope the Undersecretary can take note of this.
We note the situation, but when we have two teams of enforcement from different departments, it depends on which piece of legislation has been breached. Because for the EPD, they will not consider the contravention of the food business regulation. Right, please mull over what Mr. Peter Shiu said. We will move on now, Ms. Doreen Kong. About the PowerPoint, I see these boxes and how the application can be approved 2 weeks earlier under the PCS, Professional Certification System. Now, after going through the first two boxes on the left, is it that the FEHE staff will first conduct inspection and then a full license will be issued, and the final step relates to advancing the application for 2 weeks? I don't see the merit. Well, whilst I welcome this system, I don't understand why you can only help applicants get a license 2 weeks earlier. Can you further compress the process? And I also like to refer to the paper. Under PCS, 3 applications were turned down. That's in the LegCo's background brief. I want to know the reason for turning down these applications and why, or if there are ways to make sure that the applications would be successful, because the applicants, after all, must have spent money to engage professionals. They would like to make sure that the applications would be approved. And finally, this is a comment. I'd like to respond to what Mr. Peter Shiu said. Indeed, there are conflicts in relation to the plastic tableware legislation. Now, I watched the playback of a meeting of the panel last month. In fact, when the bill was discussed, I think, in fact, there was no discussion on whether a customer should order takeaway food for dine-in or stir-fried noodles. So let's save this argument and avoid further confusion. Well, I think that this matter should be followed up on at the panel on environmental affairs, which is a more appropriate platform. Yes, correct, Undersecretary. You don't need to respond to the third point made by Ms. Doreen Kong. Right, coming back to these boxes, there are steps to follow. So under PCS, you still need to go through certain steps. For the final step, we can advance the application, the issuance of license 2 weeks earlier. That's because the FEHE staff will arrange an on-site inspection, and then after certifying the compliance, a license can be issued in 7 days, and that's the general approach. Under PCS, after engaging an authorized person or an engineer to ensure compliance, if all the drawings are approved, then the full license can be issued by the FEHD. So the license will be issued 2 weeks earlier. But of course, we can always further improve on this arrangement. And about statistics that the member asked for, So far, we've received 13 applications under professional certification system, 8 of which have been approved. For the remaining 5, the outcome is still pending due to various reasons, such as a submission of all the necessary documents and the eligibility, etc. At the last meeting, we explained that 2 or 3 applications were turned down, and now the figure stands at 5. Mr. Bill Tang. This paper is titled Streamlining the Food Business Licensing Regime. It comes with various measures. We welcome them. Of course, we are concerned whether we'll be able to revive the catering industry in Hong Kong. Now, I am concerned about Kowloon East. We have commercial industrial sites, and because of the initiative, we have some food factories, factory canteens in industrial buildings. Because of the quality of food, many visitors would now go to industrial buildings to patronize the canteens. Now, this is getting prevalent. I want to know from the administration whether there are measures to help these factory canteens turn to restaurants to ensure that they fully comply with the requirements. Apart from factory canteens in industrial buildings, there are also various commercial activities in Kowloon East. There are food products with characteristics that are sold as takeaway, only that the customers would also consume them there and then. Other ways to ensure quality and compliance. Right, first question about factory canteens. I've noted that. Second question, can you clarify? Say you have Iberico ham, Spanish ham, sold as a food product. At the same time, you have furniture available for dining customers. For CAP 132 and 132X, there are clear requirements. The premises are required to follow these requirements. So I'm not sure about the examples you just cited. About factory canteens in the industrial buildings, the audit or the ombudsman, right, conducted investigation into eateries on the upper floors of industrial buildings. And the Ombudsman has also made recommendations to the FEHD on enforcement and control matters. That means we need to follow the legal requirements, and at the same time we note the comment on exploring enhancement measures for eating establishments in industrial buildings. It will be a long process. We need to talk to the industry, but the practice at the moment is to follow the requirements. I'm talking about licensed factory canteens on the ground floor or basement of industrial buildings. I want to know whether an avenue is available for them to become general restaurants. I will give the floor to my colleague to supplement. Mr. Gabriel Zhang, Assistant Director. Well, there are 2 types of eateries permitted in industrial buildings. One is a food factory license, the other is a factory canteen license. There are also other regulations applicable under the portfolio of different government departments, such as the Buildings Department and the Fire Services Department. So these are the 2 types of licenses that we can issue at the moment, but we'll be happy to provide support if there are changes. Mr. Lam Kwong. Thank you, Chairman. This is a paper on streamlining the food business licensing regime, such as introducing the professional certification system, changes to streamline procedures in relation to permits, waiving the submission of documents on the use of communal toilets. We welcome these streamlining measures that can help improve the business environment for the catering industry. But at the same time, you need to step up enforcement to ensure a level playing field. This is equally important. Streamlining the regime can help applicants apply for licenses, and ultimately you can ensure compliance. But in the past, we also received complaints relating to, say, party rooms. Without getting a license, they have a barbecue pit or a grill, and then there is also a refrigerator stuffed with food, and then they can either have hot pots or barbecue in these party rooms. I think they are abusing the loopholes, and I suppose this is unlicensed business because any cooking will require a license or restaurant license to be sought. So as you streamline the food business licensing regime, you need to ensure a level playing field. You should not allow anyone to abuse the loophole. Undersecretary mentioned the barbecue site at Kawa Path, and in fact my family lived there and they were nuisance by the site for decades. Now they can enjoy some fresh air because of your enforcement effort. At the same time, you need to make sure that the food for sale is fit for human consumption to safeguard public health. So my question is, in the future, will more resources be devoted to enforcement? Undersecretary. Yes, on enforcement. At the Special Finance Committee meeting, we already provided figures. I'm not going to repeat them. The professional certification system has been in place for some time. And like I said, we approved 8 applications. 2 of these applications were found to be not meeting the licensing conditions upon checking. The 6 other applications could satisfy our requirements. So we immediately took follow-up action on the remaining 2 cases. On party rooms, well, the food might not have been provided by the operator. The customer may have brought along the food for consumption in the rented party rooms. If the operator claims that the food is not provided by them, then there is a controversy here. And I think that this should be dealt with outside of the remit of this paper. Right, this is just a comment for Undersecretary. Recently, we received a complaint about a refrigerator stuffed with food inside a party room, and the customer is free to take any food for consumption. Now, in that case, if there is any breach of Cap 132 or 132X, we will follow up on the case. Anyone else? If not, then that's the end of this item. Members who have spoken are in support of the food business licensing regime and the streamlining measures. Members have also put forward some valuable views on streamlining the regime as well as improving the business environment for the F&B industry. We hope that the government will put in place more relaxation or streamlining measures to help stakeholders run their food business. Right. Thank you for coming. Item 5. About the duty visit. Please refer to CB bracket 2413 2024, which is an email sent by the Secretariat dated 27th of March about duty visit in the mainland. Some members suggested visiting Jiangsu province to study environmental hygiene and cityscape. Some other members also suggested agricultural development and food safety as the issue of study. Now, having considered members' views, I've instructed the Secretariat to communicate with the administration on the location of visit and the topics concerned, and we will consult members. That ends today's meeting. Thank you.